The bright morning sun streamed through the windows of Dulles International Airport as travelers rushed to catch their flights. Among them was Andre Wilson, though he didn't look like someone who had just closed a deal worth billions. Dressed in comfortable jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and his favorite worn leather jacket, he blended in with the crowd. Most people would never guess that the man with the backpack slung over his shoulder owned more companies than he could count on both hands. Andre checked his watch and quickened his pace. After 3 days of non-stop meetings, he was looking forward to getting home to Chicago. The acquisition of Atlantic Airways had been finalized months ago, but he had kept his ownership quiet, preferring to observe how the airline operated before making any major changes. Final boarding call for Flight 237 to Chicago O. Hair, the announcement echoed through the terminal as Andre approached the gate, ticket in hand. The gate agent smiled professionally. "Good morning, sir. Boarding pass, please." Andre handed over his phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Enjoy your flight in first class today." The agent's eyes flickered with recognition, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Andre nodded appreciatively and made his way down the jet bridge. The familiar smell of recycled air greeted him as he stepped onto the plane. He'd been on countless flights before, but this one felt different. This was the first time he'd flown on his own airline since the acquisition. "Welcome aboard," a flight attendant greeted passengers at the door with practiced cheerfulness. Andre smiled and turned left toward the first-class cabin. The seats were already filling up with business travelers in suits and wealthy vacationers. He found his seat by the window 2A and slid his backpack under the seat in front of him. Instead of using the overhead bin, he preferred keeping his laptop close. As Andre settled in, he pulled out his phone to send a quick email before takeoff. The cabin was peaceful, with the soft murmur of conversations and the occasional sound of overhead bins closing. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of exhaustion from the past few days. "Excuse me, sir?" Andre opened his eyes to see a flight attendant standing over him, her name tag reading Patricia Reynolds. She had a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes," Andre responded politely. "Your bag needs to go in the overhead compartment for takeoff," Patricia said, pointing to Andre's backpack. "It fits completely under the seat," Andre explained calmly. "I've never had an issue before." Patricia's smile stiffened. "It's airline policy. All bags must be stowed in the overhead bins during takeoff and landing in first class." Andre knew this wasn't true. He had personally reviewed Atlantic Airways policies just last month. "I don't think that's correct. As long as the bag fits completely under the seat, it should be fine." The flight attendant's demeanor shifted subtly. Her voice lowered but took on an edge that caught the attention of nearby passengers. "Sir, I've been working for this airline for 15 years. I know the policies better than you do," she said, emphasizing the "you" in a way that made Andre raise an eyebrow. "If you're going to argue with me, perhaps first class isn't the right fit for you today." A few passengers glanced over, some with curious expressions, others quickly looking away, uncomfortable with the growing tension. "I'm not arguing," Andre replied, keeping his voice steady despite his growing frustration. "I'm just saying that my bag fits the requirements for under-seat storage." Patricia crossed her arms. "Are you refusing to comply with crew member instructions?" The question hung in the air. Andre was well aware that refusing to follow crew instructions could be grounds for removal from the flight. He'd seen the viral videos of passengers being dragged off planes. Despite owning the airline, he had no desire to make a scene or delay everyone's flight. "I'm not refusing anything," he said carefully. "I'm trying to understand why this is an issue when my bag clearly fits within the designated space." Another passenger across the aisle, an older white man in an expensive suit, spoke up. "I have my briefcase under the seat too. Is that a problem?" Patricia glanced at the man's briefcase and then back at Andre. "That's a briefcase, sir." "It's different." "How is it different?" Andre asked, genuinely curious now. "Both bags fit completely under the seat." Patricia's face flushed slightly. "Sir, if you continue to question me, I'll need to speak with the captain." By now, the first-class cabin had grown quiet as passengers tuned into the unfolding drama. A young woman 2 rows back had discreetly taken out her phone, angling it to record the interaction. Andre took a deep breath. He'd faced situations like this before, moments where he was treated differently without explicit mention of race. Usually he would comply and address the issue later through proper channels. But today, bone-tired and sitting on an airplane he literally owned, his patience was wearing thin. "You know what?" Andre finally said. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor." Patricia's expression tightened. "I am the lead flight attendant on this flight." "Then I'd like to speak with the captain," Andre said firmly. "The captain is preparing for takeoff and cannot be disturbed," Patricia replied, her voice rising slightly. "Now, will you place your bag in the overhead bin, or will we need to find someone who can follow simple instructions?" The cabin grew even quieter. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The businessman across the aisle looked between Andre and Patricia with growing concern. "I'd like your employee number, please," Andre requested calmly. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. "Excuse me?" "Your employee number," Andre repeated. "I'll be filing a formal complaint about this interaction." Patricia laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Of course you will." She pointed to her name tag. "Patricia Reynolds. Feel free to complain all you want." Just then, another flight attendant appeared. Her name tag read Michelle Chen. She seemed to sense the tension immediately. "Is everything okay here, Patricia?" Michelle asked, glancing between her colleague and Andre. "This passenger is refusing to stow his bag properly and is now threatening to report me," Patricia explained, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Michelle looked at Andre's backpack, which was clearly tucked completely under the seat in front of him. She hesitated for a moment. "Sir, is there a reason you need to keep your bag with you?" she asked, her tone considerably more professional. "It has my laptop and some work documents I need during the flight," Andre explained, "and it fits completely under the seat, which complies with the airline's own policy." Michelle nodded, seeming to process this information. "Patricia, can I speak with you for a moment?" The two flight attendants stepped into the galley for a hushed conversation. Meanwhile, the businessman across the aisle leaned toward Andre. "That was completely uncalled for," he said quietly. "I've been flying first class on Atlantic for years, and I always keep my bag under the seat." Andre nodded in thanks but didn't elaborate. More passengers were watching now, some whispering to each other, others pretending to be absorbed in magazines or phones while clearly listening. Patricia and Michelle returned, with Michelle now taking the lead. "Sir, I apologize for the confusion," Michelle started, but Patricia interrupted. "Michelle, we need to prepare for departure. If he's not going to comply—" "Patricia," Michelle cut in firmly. "I've got this." Patricia's face darkened, but she stepped back slightly. Michelle turned to Andre again. "Sir, your bag is fine where it is. Can I get you anything before takeoff? Water or coffee, perhaps?" Before Andre could respond, Patricia interjected. "This is ridiculous. Who does he think he is?" The cabin fell silent once more as all eyes turned to Andre. He could feel the weight of those stares, some sympathetic, others curious, a few judgmental. In that moment, he had a choice to make. He could continue flying under the radar, handle the situation privately later, or he could put an end to it right now. With a quiet sigh, Andre reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Michelle, whose eyes widened as she read it. "I think we have a problem here," Andre said, his voice steady and clear enough for everyone to hear. "My name is Andre Wilson and I own this airline." The words hung in the air like a sudden clap of thunder. "My name is Andre Wilson and I own this airline." The first-class cabin went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop as passengers stared, mouth slightly open. Michelle's face had gone pale as she looked down at the business card in her hand, then back at Andre, her eyes wide with recognition. Patricia stood frozen, her face a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. That's not possible," she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "The airline is owned by Wilson Global Investments, not some—" She stopped herself, but the unspoken words lingered in the air. "Not someone like you. Wilson Global Investments," Andre said calmly, "is my company. I acquired a controlling stake in Atlantic Airways 8 months ago." He pointed to his business card in Michelle's trembling hand. "As you can see," the businessman across the aisle let out a low whistle. A few rows back, someone whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. Patricia's face had drained of all color. She looked like she might faint. I didn't know." "Clearly," Andre replied. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The quiet authority in his voice commanded more attention than any shout could have. Michelle, recovering her composure slightly, turned to her colleague. "Patricia, maybe you should go check if the captain needs anything." But Patricia seemed rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak further. The reality of what had just happened and to whom she had just happened to do it was sinking in. Her 15-year career flashed before her eyes. By now, several passengers had their phones out recording the scene. The young woman who had started filming earlier was trying to discreetly angle her phone to catch every moment. Social media would be ablaze within minutes. Andre noticed the phones and sighed inwardly. This wasn't how he had planned to announce his ownership of the airline. He had wanted to spend time observing operations, understanding the company culture from the inside before making his presence known. That plan was now thoroughly derailed. "I think," Andre said, addressing Michelle while pointedly ignoring Patricia, "we should let the captain know there's been an incident. I'd also like the contact information for your director of customer experience." Michelle nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Right away, Mr. Wilson." As Michelle hurried to the front of the plane, Patricia finally found her voice again. "Mr. Wilson, I had no idea who you were." "If I had known," Andre cut her off with a raised hand. "And that's exactly the problem, isn't it? You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic respect. Would you have questioned him?" He gestured to the businessman across the aisle. "Or her." He nodded toward an older woman in the row behind him. Patricia's silence was answer enough. Andre continued, his voice level but firm. "Every passenger on this airline deserves the same level of respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like. That's not just my personal belief. That should be company policy." By now, word had spread throughout the plane. Passengers in economy were craning their necks, trying to see what was happening in first class. Flight attendants at the back were whispering urgently to each other, throwing nervous glances toward the front of the plane. The captain emerged from the cockpit, his face a mask of professional concern. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair, and the confident bearing of someone who had been flying planes for decades. "Mr. Wilson," the captain said, extending his hand. "I'm Captain Thomas Reeves. I understand there's been a situation." Andre shook the captain's hand. "Yes, there has. Though I'd prefer to discuss it privately rather than delay everyone's flight." Captain Reeves nodded. "Of course. Would you mind joining me for a moment?" As Andre stood to follow the captain, Patricia finally managed to move. She stepped back, pressing herself against the bulkhead as if trying to disappear. The other passengers watched in fascination as the airline's owner followed the captain toward the front galley. In the small, cramped space, Captain Reeves got straight to the point. "Michelle filled me in on what happened. I want to apologize on behalf of the entire crew." "I appreciate that," Andre said. "But an apology isn't really what I'm looking for." The captain nodded, waiting for Andre to continue. "What concerns me is what this incident reveals about the culture of this airline," Andre explained. "If Patricia feels comfortable treating any passenger that way, it suggests a deeper problem. I can assure you, Mr. Wilson, her behavior doesn't reflect our values or training," Captain Reeves said quickly. "Maybe not explicitly," Andre acknowledged, "but it happened on your watch on my airline. That makes it our problem to fix." Michelle joined them, handing Andre a card. "Here's the contact information for Diane Harper, our Director of Customer Experience. I've already sent her a message about what happened." Andre took the card and slipped it into his pocket. "Thank you, Michelle. What would you like us to do about Patricia?" Captain Reeves asked carefully. "We can have someone meet the plane when we land, remove her from the flight." Andre considered this for a moment. The easy thing would be to have Patricia escorted off the plane, make a public example of her. It would certainly make for a satisfying conclusion to the viral videos that were undoubtedly already circulating. But would it actually solve anything? No, Andre decided. She stays on the flight. Both the captain and Michelle looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Captain Reeves asked. Andre nodded. Removing her now would only delay the flight for everyone else. Besides, firing one flight attendant doesn't fix a systemic problem. He glanced back toward the cabin where Patricia still stood, visibly shaken. The other passengers were watching her with a mixture of judgment and morbid curiosity. "But I do want to speak with her before we take off," Andre added. Captain Reeves hesitated. "Mr. Wilson, with all due respect, we're already 15 minutes behind schedule." "I understand that, Captain. But I think you'll find that as the majority owner of this airline, My request takes priority over the schedule. There was no malice in Andre's voice, just the quiet confidence of someone used to being in charge. The captain nodded. Of course. I'll have Michelle take over Patricia's duties for now. Andre returned to the first-class cabin where conversations immediately hushed. All eyes followed him as he approached Patricia, who looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Ms. Reynolds, Andre said, his voice neither angry nor accusatory. Would you join me for a moment? Patricia glanced desperately around as if looking for an escape route. Finding none, she nodded stiffly and followed Andre to the back of the first-class section, where they could speak with some privacy. I imagine you think you're about to be fired, Andre began. Patricia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Aren't I? That depends, Andre replied. I'd like to understand why you felt the need to single me out when my bag was no different from others in first class. Patricia swallowed hard. I was just trying to enforce the rules. Were you? Because it seems like you were enforcing rules that don't actually exist and only for certain passengers. Patricia's gaze dropped to the floor. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to be honest, Andre said simply. With me and with yourself. A tense silence stretched between them. Around them, the airplane hummed with activity as the crew prepared for departure. But this small corner seemed suspended in time. I made assumptions, Patricia finally admitted, her voice barely audible. When I saw you, I didn't think... You didn't look like I belonged in first class, Andre finished for her. Patricia nodded miserably. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen so many people try to break the rules, upgrade themselves without paying that I assumed. Because of how I was dressed? Or because of how I look? Andre pressed. Patricia's silence was telling. Here's what's going to happen, Andre said. You're going to continue working this flight. You're going to provide excellent service to every passenger on this plane, regardless of what they look like or how they're dressed. And when we land, you and I are going to have another conversation about the future. Patricia looked up, surprised. You're not firing me right now? No, Andre said. That would be easy, but it wouldn't solve the real problem. And I didn't build my companies by taking the easy way out. Just then, Captain Reeves's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We've been cleared for departure and will be on our way shortly. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for takeoff. Patricia wiped her eyes quickly and straightened her uniform. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything right now, Andre replied. But I expect your actions for the rest of this flight to speak volumes. As Patricia moved away to attend to her duties, Andre returned to his seat. The businessman across the aisle leaned over. That was impressive, he said quietly. Most people in your position would have had her thrown off the plane. Andre shrugged. Firing one person doesn't change a culture. And I didn't buy this airline just to make money. I bought it to make it better. As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, Andre closed his eyes, mentally preparing for the conversations to come when they landed. His quiet day of travel had turned into something much more significant. But maybe, just maybe, this uncomfortable incident would be the catalyst for the changes he had been planning all along. The engines roared to life, and Atlantic Airways Flight 237 lifted off into the clear blue sky, carrying with it a story that was about to go viral and an airline on the verge of transformation. By the time Flight 237 reached cruising altitude, news of what had happened was already spreading across social media. Passengers had posted videos of the confrontation, and within an hour, current Atlantic Airways boss and Daesh flight attendant Freeze were trending nationwide. In the first-class cabin, an uncomfortable calm had settled. Patricia moved through her duties like a robot, her face a mask of professional politeness that couldn't quite hide her anxiety. She avoided making eye contact with Andre, who sat quietly working on his laptop, seemingly unbothered by the storm he'd inadvertently created. Michelle approached Andre's seat with a fresh cup of coffee. Here you go, Mr. Wilson, just the way you like it. Andre looked up, slightly confused. He hadn't ordered coffee, let alone specified how he liked it. Michelle leaned in and whispered, I'm guessing black, no sugar? That's how all the big bosses drink it in the movies. Despite everything, Andre couldn't help but smile. Actually, I prefer it with cream and one sugar. But thank you for this. Michelle's face fell. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll get you another one right away. No need, Andre said, taking the cup. Black coffee is fine. I appreciate the thought. As Michelle moved away, Andre returned to his laptop where his inbox was flooding with messages. His executive assistant had sent no fewer than 12 emails in the past 30 minutes, each with links to different social media, posts and news articles already picking up the story. Atlantic Airways owner confronts racist flight attendant, read one. Headline: Billionaire Andre Wilson schools airline. Staff on equality mid-flight, declared. Another. Andre sighed and closed his laptop. This wasn't how he'd planned to spend his Friday. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. Just saw you're trending. Again, can't leave you alone for 5 minutes. He smiled and typed back, not my fault this time. Call you when I land. The businessman across the aisle, who had introduced himself as Richard Cooper, leaned over again. You know, I've been flying with Atlantic for years, and I've never seen anything like what happened today. Andre nodded politely, hoping to end the conversation there. He wasn't in the mood for small talk, but Richard continued, lowering his voice. Between you and me, some of the staff have gotten a bit entitled over the years, especially on the premium routes. Maybe this shakeup is exactly what they need. Before Andre could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Diane Harper, Atlantic Airways. Excuse me, he said to Richard, standing up to take the call in the galley. Mr. Wilson, this is Diane Harper, Director of Customer Experience, the voice on the other end said without preamble. I've just been briefed on the incident. I can't tell you how mortified we are. Ms. Harper, Andre replied calmly. I think we should have a proper conversation when I land. This isn't something to be handled over the phone at 35,000 feet. Of course, Diane agreed quickly. I'll meet you personally at the gate. We've already prepared a statement condemning the behavior and announcing Patricia Reynolds' termination. Andre frowned. Who authorized that? There was a pause on the other end. I assumed you would want immediate action. The videos are everywhere, Mr. Wilson. Our PR team felt we needed to get ahead of this. Ms. Harper, please make sure that statement doesn't go out, Andre said firmly. I haven't decided what action to take regarding Ms. Reynolds, and I certainly haven't authorized anyone to make that decision for me. But, sir, the public backlash is not going to dictate how I run my airline, Andre finished. I'll see you when we land. He ended the call and turned to find Captain Reeves standing behind him. Everything okay, Mr. Wilson? The captain asked. Andre shook his head. Apparently my PR team is ready to throw Patricia to the wolves to save face. That's not how I do business. Captain Reeves looked surprised. Most owners would be concerned about the company's image first. I am concerned about the company's image, Andre replied. But I'm more concerned about its soul. What happened today isn't just about one flight attendant. It's about a culture that allowed her to think that behavior was acceptable. The captain nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, most of the crew aren't like Patricia. Many of us have been pushing for more inclusive training for years. Then maybe it's time someone listened, Andre said. As they spoke, neither noticed Patricia standing nearby, close enough to overhear their conversation. She quietly slipped away before they could see her, her face a mixture of confusion and something that might have been hope. The rest of the flight passed without incident. Patricia performed her duties efficiently but kept her distance from Andre. The other passengers alternated between stealing glances at him and pretending not to notice him at all. By the time the plane began its descent into Chicago O'Hare, Andre had drafted preliminary notes for the changes he wanted to implement. When they landed, Captain Reeves made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago. Local time is 11:45 a.m. and the temperature is 72 degrees. We ask that you remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off. Thank you for flying Atlantic Airways. There was a pause and then he added, and on behalf of the entire crew, I want to apologize for any disturbance during our flight today. Atlantic Airways is committed to providing excellent service to all our passengers without exception. As the plane taxied to the gate, Andre gathered his belongings. Patricia appeared beside him, her composure mostly restored, though her hand still trembled slightly. Mr. Wilson, she said quietly, I know you're meeting with Ms. Harper when we land. I just wanted to say, I understand if you need to fire me. What I did was wrong. Andre studied her face, looking for sincerity. Why do you think what you did was wrong, Ms. Reynolds? Patricia seemed taken aback by the question. She had clearly expected anger or cold dismissal, not a philosophical inquiry. Because, she hesitated, because I made assumptions about you based on how you looked. Because I enforced rules for you that I didn't enforce for others. Because I was rude and dismissive. And if I hadn't turned out to be the owner of the airline, would it still have been wrong? Patricia's face flushed with shame. Yes, it would have been just as wrong. Andre nodded, satisfied with her answer. We'll talk more after we deplane. As the doors opened and passengers began to file out, Andre could see a group of people waiting in the jetway. Diane Harper was easy to spot, a tall woman in a crisp suit, flanked by what appeared to be members of the PR team and airport security. Remember what I said? Andre told Patricia quietly. This isn't just about you. He stepped off the plane and approached the waiting group. Ms. Harper, I presume? Diane stepped forward, hand extended. Mr. Wilson, thank you for flying with us today. The irony of her standard greeting in these circumstances wasn't lost on either of them. We have a private room prepared where we can discuss the incident. Andre glanced at the security personnel. And they are here because... To escort Ms. Reynolds to Human Resources, Diane explained, lowering her voice. We thought it best to handle this discreetly. Ms. Reynolds will be joining us for our discussion, Andre said firmly. Along with Captain Reeves and any other crew members who wish to participate. Diane's professional smile faltered. Mr. Wilson, with all due respect, that's not standard procedure for disciplinary actions. Then perhaps it's time to reconsider your procedures, Andre replied. This isn't just a disciplinary matter. It's an opportunity to address deeper issues. Before Diane could respond, the terminal doors opened, and a flood of reporters and camera crews surged forward. Someone had tipped off the press. Mr. Wilson, can you comment on the alleged discrimination you faced on your own airline? Is it true you're firing the entire flight crew? Will you be filing a lawsuit against Atlantic Airways despite owning it? The questions came rapid fire. Microphones thrust toward Andre's face. Security moved to create a barrier between him and the press. Andre raised a hand, and surprisingly, the shouting subsided. I'll make a brief statement, and then I ask for your patience as we handle this matter internally. Cameras flashed as he continued. What happened on today's flight was unfortunate, but not unique. Many people face similar treatment every day on airlines and elsewhere. The difference is most of them don't own the company. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. I purchased Atlantic Airways 8 months ago because I believed in its potential. Today's incident has only strengthened my resolve to make this airline a leader not just in comfort or convenience, but in how we treat every passenger with dignity and respect. A reporter called out, Will you be firing the flight attendant who confronted you? Andre looked back toward the jetway where Patricia stood watching, her face pale but composed. This isn't about firing one employee, Andre said carefully. It's about changing a culture. Ms. Reynolds and I will be working together to make sure what happened today becomes a learning opportunity for the entire company. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Andre turned away. That's all for now. Thank you. He gestured for Patricia to join him and the others. As she stepped forward, cameras clicked rapidly, capturing her stunned expression. You're not firing me? She whispered as they walked. Not today, Andre replied. But the next few weeks won't be easy for either of us. Together, they walked through the terminal toward a future neither had anticipated when the day began. Behind them, the story continued to spread, taking on a life of its own. In offices and living rooms across the country, people watched the videos and read the headlines. Some saw justice served, others saw a powerful man showing unexpected mercy, and still others saw a calculated PR move. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Whatever came next for Atlantic Airways would be worth watching. The private conference room on the top floor of Atlantic Airways. Chicago headquarters offered a stunning view of the city skyline, but no one was admiring the scenery. It had been 3 days since the incident on Flight 237, and the video had racked up over 20 million views. News outlets had picked up the story, social media was ablaze with opinions, and Atlantic Airways phone lines were jammed with callers demanding Patricia's firing. Inside the room, Andre sat at the head of a long mahogany table. To his right was Diane Harper, looking considerably more stressed than when they'd first met at the airport. To his left sat George Thompson, the company's chief human resources officer, a bald man with wire-rimmed glasses who kept checking his tablet for new developments. The door opened, and Patricia walked in, accompanied by her union representative. a stern-looking woman named Linda Parker. Patricia looked different in civilian clothes, more vulnerable somehow, in jeans and a simple blouse instead of her uniform. "Please sit down," Andre said, gesturing to the empty chairs. As they settled in, Andre leaned forward. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about something. This meeting isn't about deciding whether to fire Ms. Reynolds. That decision has already been made." Patricia's face fell, and Linda straightened, preparing to argue. "I'm not firing her," Andre continued, surprising everyone in the room. "At least not yet." Diane couldn't hide her shock. "Mr. Wilson, with all due respect, the public is demanding action. Our customer satisfaction ratings have dropped 12 points since the incident. Bookings are down. We need to show we're taking this seriously." "And how does firing one flight attendant accomplish that?" Andre asked. "Do you think racism and bias disappear when you remove one person? Or do they just go underground where they're harder to address?" The room fell silent. George cleared his throat uncomfortably. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Wilson?" Linda asked, suspicion evident in her voice. Andre pushed a folder across the table, a company-wide initiative on unconscious bias and inclusive customer service. Starting with the executive team, then managers, then frontline staff, and Ms. Reynolds will help develop and implement it. Patricia blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm the one who made a mistake," Andre finished for her. "A mistake that reflects problems throughout our organization. You've been with Atlantic for 15 years, Ms. Reynolds. You know this company's culture from the inside in a way that I don't yet." Linda frowned. "This sounds like you're asking Patricia to be the face of your diversity program, to parade her around as the reformed racist. I can't recommend she accept that kind of role." Andre shook his head. "That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm offering her a chance to be part of the solution instead of being scapegoated as the entire problem." He turned to Patricia. "You told me on the plane that what you did was wrong. Did you mean that?" Patricia nodded slowly. "Yes, I did." "Then help me fix it, not just for one flight, but for the whole airline." George looked skeptical. "The public wants blood, Mr. Wilson. They want to see consequences." "They'll see consequences," Andre assured him. "Just not the kind they're expecting." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I didn't build my companies by giving people what they expected. I built them by giving people what they actually needed." For the next 2 hours, they hashed out the details. Patricia would be suspended with pay for 1 month. During that time, she would work with a team of consultants Andre was bringing in to develop a comprehensive training program. When she returned, she would be reassigned from flight duties to helping implement the new initiative. As the meeting wrapped up, Diane still looked concerned. "The press is waiting for an announcement. What should I tell them?" Andre considered for a moment. "Tell them the truth, that we're taking this opportunity to address systemic issues, rather than pretending one firing solves the problem." After everyone filed out, Patricia lingered behind. "Mr. Wilson, why are you doing this? Most people in your position would have fired me on the spot." Andre turned to face her. "When I was 16, I got a job at an electronics store. 3 weeks in, the manager accused me of stealing a phone, had me empty my pockets, searched my backpack, called the police. Turned out another employee had taken it." He paused, the memory still fresh even after all these years. "The store owner fired the manager, gave me a gift card, and thought that fixed everything. But it didn't. I still felt humiliated every time I walked into that store. I still saw the same looks from other employees who'd watched it happen. Nothing really changed." Patricia nodded slowly, understanding dawning on her face. "I'm not doing this to be nice to you, Ms. Reynolds," Andre continued. "I'm doing it because firing you would be easy, and easy doesn't lead to real change." A month later, Andre stood at a podium in the same conference room, now packed with reporters. Behind him was a banner reading Atlantic Airways Higher Standards. "Today I'm announcing the most comprehensive customer service and inclusion initiative in our industry," he began. "Over the next year, every Atlantic Airways employee, from myself to our newest hires, will undergo this training program." Cameras flashed as he continued. "We're also revising our policies, creating clearer guidelines, and establishing new channels for customers to report concerns. Because at Atlantic Airways, we believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of who they are or what they look like." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Wilson, Is it true that Patricia Reynolds, the flight attendant from the viral video, helped develop this program? Andre glanced to the side of the room where Patricia stood watching nervously. She looked different, more confident somehow despite everything she'd been through. Ms. Reynolds was one of many contributors to this initiative, Andre replied carefully. Her willingness to acknowledge her mistakes and work toward solutions has been valuable to our process. Another reporter called out, "Many people feel she should have been fired. How do you respond to that?" Andre leaned into the microphone. "It's easy to fire one person. It's much harder to change a culture. We're choosing the harder path because it's the right thing to do." After the press conference, as the reporters filed out, Patricia approached Andre. "That went better than I expected," she said. Andre nodded. "It's just the beginning. The real test will be implementing these changes across the company." Patricia hesitated, then asked, "Do you think it will work? Will people actually change how they think?" "Some will. Some won't," Andre admitted. "But even those who don't change their thinking will have to change their behavior. And sometimes behavior changes attitudes over time." As they talked, Diane Harper approached with a tablet. "Mr. Wilson, you might want to see this." She handed him the device, which showed a social media feed. Vermont Higher Standards was trending, with thousands of people sharing the press conference and commenting. The responses were mixed. Some praised Atlantic Airways for taking a different approach. Others criticized them for not firing Patricia, and many were reserving judgment to see if real change followed. One comment in particular caught Andre's eye. "This is the first time I've seen a company not take the easy way out." Watching to see if they follow through, Andre handed the tablet back to Diane. "Make sure we do," he said simply. Later that afternoon, Andre was preparing to leave for another meeting when his phone rang. It was his sister. "Just saw your press conference," she said. "Bold move. You think it was the wrong call?" Andre asked. "I didn't say that," she replied. "But you know this would have been easier if you just fired her and moved on." Andre smiled, though his sister couldn't see it. "When have I ever done things the easy way?" "Fair point. So what happens now?" Andre looked out his office window at the planes taking off and landing in the distance. "Now comes the hard part. Actually changing how things work." As he hung up, Andre knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Some board members were already questioning his approach, worried about short-term profits. Many employees were resistant to the new training programs. And the public was waiting to see if this was just another corporate PR move or something genuine. But for the first time since buying the airline, Andre felt certain he'd made the right decision. It wasn't just about one flight attendant or one incident anymore. It was about building the kind of company he'd always wanted to run. One where everyone, employees and customers alike, was treated with the dignity they deserved. As he gathered his things to leave, his eye caught a framed article on his wall. The first major profile written about him when he'd made his first million. The headline read, "Andre Wilson, taking the road less traveled. Some things never changed." 6 months later, Andre stood in the back of a large training room at Atlantic Airways Training Center, watching as Patricia wrapped up a session with a group of new flight attendants. "Remember," she was saying to the attentive group, "every passenger deserves the same level of respect and service, regardless of how they're dressed, how they look, or who you think they might be." Her voice carried a conviction that could only come from personal experience. A young man in the front row raised his hand. "But what if someone's breaking a rule? Aren't we supposed to enforce company policies?" Patricia nodded. "Good question. Yes, we enforce policies, but we enforce them equally for everyone. And we do it with respect. The policies exist to ensure safety and comfort, not to make anyone feel unwelcome or singled out." As the session ended and the trainees filed out, Patricia noticed Andre and walked over to him. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked. "Long enough," he replied with a smile. "You're good at this." Patricia shrugged but couldn't hide her pride. "It's easier to teach when you've made the mistakes yourself." They walked together toward the executive offices. Passing the wall that now displayed Atlantic Airways' new customer service pledge in large, bold letters, "Respect for all, no exceptions." The quarterly numbers came in, Andre said as they walked. Customer satisfaction scores are up 15 points. Complaints about staff treatment are down 30%. And bookings, back to pre-incident levels and climbing. Andre confirmed. Turns out, people appreciate an airline that admits its mistakes and actually tries to fix them. They reached the conference room where the executive team was waiting for their monthly update on the initiative. Before they went in, Patricia paused. "You know, there are still people who think you should have fired me," she said quietly. "Some days I still think that myself." Andre considered this. "Do you remember Richard Cooper? The businessman who sat across from me on that flight?" Patricia nodded. "Of course. He's been on several of my flights since then. He told me something interesting last time we spoke," Andre continued. "He said that watching how we handled the situation made him reconsider how he deals with mistakes in his own company. Instead of just firing people, he started looking at how to fix the underlying problems." He opened the door to the conference room. One person changing their mind might not seem like much, but it's a start. Inside, the executive team was already seated around the table. Diane Harper, now fully on board with the initiative, stood up to greet them. "Perfect timing," she said. "We were just about to discuss the new training video series." As they took their seats, George from HR slid a tablet across to Andre. "You might want to see this first." On the screen was an article from a major business magazine. "Atlantic Airways sets new industry standard for inclusive service." Andre smiled as he skimmed the article, which detailed how other airlines were beginning to adopt similar training programs. When he looked up, he noticed Patricia quietly reading over his shoulder, her expression a mixture of disbelief and pride. "I never thought," she began, then stopped herself. "That something good could come from that day?" Andre finished for her. She nodded. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the biggest changes," he said, addressing the entire room now. "But only if we're willing to do the hard work that comes after." The meeting proceeded as they discussed the next phase of the initiative, expanding the training to airport ground staff and creating new guidelines for handling passenger concerns. When they finished, most of the executives filed out, leaving Andre, Patricia, and Diane. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Diane said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "We've been invited to present our program at the International Air Transport Association conference next month. They want both of you to speak." Patricia's eyes widened. "Both of us? In front of the entire industry?" "Your story has resonated with a lot of people," Diane explained. "Not just the incident, but what came after. How you both chose to respond." Andre watched Patricia carefully. "It's your decision," he told her. "No one would blame you if you wanted to stay out of the spotlight." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she straightened her shoulders and said, "If telling our story can help other companies make these changes, then I'm willing to do it." "Good," Diane said, visibly relieved. "I'll let them know you've both accepted." After Diane left, Patricia turned to Andre. "You know what people will say, don't you? That this is all for show. That you're using me as the reformed racist in your corporate PR campaign." Andre nodded. "Some will say that, yes. Does it bother you?" "It used to," Patricia admitted. "But I know the truth. I've seen the changes happening every day, in how we treat passengers and how we treat each other. That matters more than what strangers think." As they walked out together, Andre's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Captain Reeves, who had become a strong advocate for the initiative among the flight crews. "Just had a passenger tell me this was the first time she's flown without feeling judged or disrespected," the message read. "Small victories." Andre showed the message to Patricia, who smiled. "That's what it's all about, isn't it? The small victories that add up over time." 1 month later, Andre and Patricia stood backstage at the IATA conference in Geneva. Through the curtains, they could see hundreds of airline executives and industry leaders waiting for their presentation. "Nervous?" Andre asked. Patricia nodded. "Terrified, but ready." The host announced their names, and as they walked out onto the stage, the applause was polite but reserved. Many in the audience were still skeptical about Atlantic Airways' approach, seeing it as a risky and unnecessary deviation from the standard corporate playbook of firing employees involved in PR disasters. Andre stepped up to the microphone first. "6 months ago, Atlantic Airways made headlines for all the wrong reasons," he began. "I was that passenger in first class, confronted by a flight attendant who made assumptions about me based on how I looked." He gestured to Patricia. "And this is that flight attendant, Patricia Reynolds." A murmur ran through the crowd. Most had seen the viral video, but few expected both people involved to appear together on stage. We're here today not to rehash what went wrong, but to share what we've learned about making things right, Andre continued. Not just for one incident, but for an entire company culture. He stepped back and Patricia took the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. 6 months ago, I made a mistake that could have, maybe should have, cost me my job, she said. I enforced rules unfairly. I made assumptions based on appearance. I let biases I didn't even realize I had affect how I treated a passenger. She paused, looking out at the audience. But instead of firing me and declaring the problem solved, Mr. Wilson and Atlantic Airways did something harder. They used my mistake as a starting point for real change. Over the next hour, they presented the details of the program, the training modules, the policy revisions, the new reporting systems. They shared the results. Improved customer satisfaction, decreased complaints, and a measurable change in company culture. They didn't sugarcoat the challenges or pretend the work was done. When they finished, the response was no longer polite or reserved. The applause was enthusiastic, and the questions that followed were thoughtful and engaged. Other airlines wanted to know how they could implement similar programs. Industry experts wanted data on the business impact. As they finally left the stage, a reporter approached them. Mr. Wilson, do you feel vindicated by the success of your approach? Andre shook his head. This isn't about vindication. It's about valuing people enough to do the hard work of real change. The reporter turned to Patricia. And Ms. Reynolds, how does it feel to have gone from being the villain in a viral video to a spokesperson for industry change? Patricia thought for a moment. I never wanted to be either of those things. I just wanted to be good at my job. Now I understand that being good at my job means seeing and respecting every passenger as an individual. Later that evening, as they waited for their flight back to Chicago, Andre received an email from his executive assistant. Another airline had announced it was adopting a similar training program. Then another. By the end of the week, 5 major carriers had followed suit. It's starting to spread, Andre told Patricia as they boarded. This time, Patricia walked through first class without a second thought about who belonged there and who didn't. As she helped passengers with their bags and answered questions about connecting flights, there was a new awareness in her interactions. A consciousness of treating everyone with the same warm respect. When they reached Andre's seat, she paused. You know, sometimes I still wonder why you didn't just fire me that day. Andre looked up at her. Do you still think I should have? Patricia shook her head. No, that would have been easier for everyone, but it wouldn't have changed anything. Not really. Exactly, Andre said. And sometimes the hardest path leads to the best destination. As the plane took off, rising above the clouds, Andre looked out the window at the vast sky. The incident that had started it all now seemed both distant and pivotal. A single moment that had changed the trajectory of an entire company, and perhaps, in some small way, an industry. It wasn't perfect. There would always be more work to do. But for now, at 35,000 feet, it felt like they were moving in the right direction.